This session will focus on local design solutions being propagated across the subcontinent by leading architects of India. The cultural sensitivity incorporated by international architects for projects in India shall also be showcased. Our chair for the session is Mr. Gaurav Shorey. Over to you, Mr. Shorey.
So again, very humbled to be on the dais with the eminent experts, someone who we've looked up to as we've grown up studying architecture. Back in college days, I have colleagues from college, Mr. Gandhian, who's now very senior up in Sikkim, and we've looked up to these people as experts. So it's great to be introducing them for today's next session. I'd first like to call upon Mr. Pradeep Sachdeva, an architect, urban designer, and landscape architect. Pradeep Sachdeva is the principal architect of PSDA Studio, a design studio based in New Delhi in India. He has an extensive body of work focusing on the hospitality sector and public spaces. One of the first few firms who are looking at large-scale public open spaces. He has designed some of India's most well-known public spaces, including the iconic Food and Crafts Bazaar, Delhi Haat, the Garden of Five Senses, Saijul Adab, both in Delhi, and the Godavari riverfront in the town Nanded. He is also involved in the master planning of heritage and cultural precincts in Kolkata, Varanasi, Guwahati, and Delhi. The Delhi Haat at Aurobindo Marg in Delhi won the PATA Gold Medal in 1995. In 2003, it became one of the first public spaces in the country to be made completely barrier-free, for which it was given a National Award for Promotion of Barrier-Free Environments in 2005. His work draws inspiration from the local context, rich craft traditions, architecture, and history of the surrounding regions. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thank you very much, everybody, and I see a pretty packed hall, quite a large audience. I'm talking not so much here about engineering sustainability, construction sustainability, but more of something that's concerned, and I think it needs to be increasingly integrated with our other rating systems, which is social sustainability, trying to provide equity for people so that spaces, buildings are more democratic. Barrier-free is, of course, only one of them, but I think the whole planning processes need to be, and solutions being provided by professionals need to be a lot more inclusive. Our urban population is expected to double in the next couple of decades. We are absolutely different from other parts of the world. While we do have to learn from a lot of other societies, but really our solutions have to be local. I think the kind of cultural richness and diversity we have here is absolutely unique and a huge asset if you see it in a positive manner. There have been large number of first generation urban dwellers now, and therefore we do tend to see extremely chaotic cities. I think as we move to the next generation of city dwellers, it's probably possible to make our cities a lot more structured, cohesive, as we learn from living in the first generation and the rapid expansion. One of the things is the diverse modes of transport that we have, 20, 30 at any given point across the country. And therefore, existing models need to be reworked. The present situation has been a bit grim. I don't think the urban fabric, it does not provide for the needs of the urban Indian. A lot of it is planning. Some, of course, is our own apathy on what we tend to do. We can build a world-class metro system. This is the Qutub Minar metro station. And this is what happens in the monsoons over here. That's across the Jama Masjid area in Urdu Bazaar. We can build these buildings, I mean, but really, I mean, are they what we need in this country? Can we learn from this first generation of rapid sort of buildings that have come up here, or extremely competent housing perhaps, and then how do you really get to your buildings? That's Gurgaon. And I think all of us need to remember we have to look at the future, which is children, and what is it that we are going to be able to leave for them. That's a little workshop happening in our office a couple of weeks back. We have a 2-day open design festival there where a lot of young designers come and participate. And one of the activities is, which runs parallel, is a workshop for children. So I'm now going to quickly show you some projects. While it is Make in India being the theme for this particular moment, these are typically very Indian problems that we have. Jama Masjid, and this country is full of precincts like the Jama Masjid area, built in the 17th century. An aerial view post 1857 where large parts of the front were actually cleaned out by the British after what we refer to as the First War of Independence. A more recent Google image where you see the really dense settlement which has grown organically, traditionally over the last few centuries, and of course across that is the Red Fort. So we worked on this project for nearly 10 years. It remains unbuilt. We've had a master plan which was developed, went through 2 different layers of Urban Arts Commission. And while we did have a very, very simple sort of doable solution for this project, it's still being talked about in the government, and right now they are deliberating on how to move to the next step. This is one of the issues is the traffic there, complete chaos, a lot of non-motorized vehicles, Meena Bazaar, which is more like a shanty town, the streets across the mosque. And what we did was intense, over a year, a lot of studies on how the streets are used, how the open spaces are used. So you can see in the blow up how cars are parked, which is very typical of our street, how hawkers are sitting. We measured and marked and surveyed every square meter of the precinct. That's another part which is near the motor market, where you will see the footpath actually blocked with two-wheelers and cars parked on top. Hawkers at certain time of the day, at certain time of the week, markets during the festivals. A little before Eid, it gets so crowded in front of the mosque. Now, all these are unique aspects of India. You can't wish them away. They are the life and soul of this country. But what we haven't managed to do is channelize this into livable cities and livable areas. These were further studies. I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to rush through. And Gaurav, I believe I have 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 8 more minutes. Perfect. So these were analysis studies. We involved IIT Delhi, their transport, Geetham's group, to look at how the vehicles were moving, what kind of parking issues were there, a consolidated scheme, and made a whole. This is a very broad schematic on the consolidation of the spaces, which is what we proposed, because the place is completely fragmented right now. Relocate inappropriately sited facilities, inappropriately sited buildings, which included Meena Bazaar. We also had about 50 to 60 stakeholder meetings with all the users of the area, and that really takes a lot of energy. And eventually we had pretty much most of them on board, and that included the hawkers on one end to the imam of the Jama Masjid on the other end, which pretty much covers everybody in between. Redeveloping of the street network and make the whole precinct completely pedestrian. Also designate spaces for informal commercial activities, which is the hawkers, absolutely unique to this part of the world, South Asia. And here we have a consolidated proposal which cleared out the front of the mosque, which relocated the Meena Bazaar to one end in a manner where they won't be able to add things on top by putting green roofs on walls, and by and large freeing up the entire area for the general public on 2 legs. no cars inside. So this is what the existing image looks like, and this is what the proposal would have looked like. These are hand-drawn sketches from our office. Similarly, when you look back from the mosque steps, it would look like that. Our office tends to look at solutions by trying to simplify them to the degree we can, because as it is, things are very complex, and unless we are able to simplify things, we probably would not be able to implement. This is unbuilt, but we also have some projects which have been built, including the riverfront in Nanded. I'm just running through. I have only about 5 minutes left. So these are images which I think are self-explanatory. We also looked at road sections, and these are designed specifically for non-motorized vehicle lanes, wide footpaths, and limiting the space being given to the cars. This is a project in Maharashtra where we developed the streets across the city under JNNURM. This is a workshop we had with the local urban body workers, which is the municipal corporation there, along with Jeroen, who's a bicycle lane planner. So we had intense series of capacity building workshops for the city, because it's not a matter of putting in the physical infrastructure, but really getting the local authorities, municipal corporation, etc., to take ownership of the projects. And only then it's possible to maintain projects of this nature. Once the project was completed, this is a bicycle rally which is taking place to celebrate the project. And a picture that makes me very proud, that the police actually started going around in Nanded on bicycles. It reflects the way forward for a democratic society that we are, and what democracy means to somebody like me. And so these were the earlier images of the street as it was, with again, and you could be in any city in the plains in India, not the mountains. And again, we did sort of very, very graphic studies to understand how things were moving. And you know, we go on saying, let's expand the road, but eventually what you have normally available is so small. So we developed road sections, again for walkability, for cycling, for hawkers, and for putting in all the other elements that are there on our streets. Parked auto rickshaws, parked cycle rickshaws, you know, you need a police van, which tend to cause a lot of friction. So it ranges from a 9-meter wide road to a 30-meter wide road, including bus stops, 4-wheeler parking, 2-wheeler parking, auto rickshaw stands, etc. Public toilets, rainwater harvesting, and this is what the visualization of the street looks like, with safe pedestrian crossing. It's also our job to reduce fatalities on streets. And these are some of the finished project images where you see. And it transformed the city of Nanded. You know, it got an airport which became functional after the project was over. We used to drive down from either Aurangabad or Hyderabad, and we were now able to fly. And you could see that the whole city, it's sort of reasonably easy interventions are possible, and they change. It gives hope to people, and I think that's also part of sustainability in a system of a society. This is the main chowk in the city of Nanded. I have about 2 minutes left, so I think I won't be able to take you to all the projects. This is Delhi Heart. It's a little over 20 years old now. I was lucky, I think, to get a break to be able to do it when I was in my early 30s. And these are early pictures. The project was developed in a language that architecture should not overwhelm the users here, which is every 2 weeks we get a series of craftspersons who come and use this project for selling crafts from across the country. And therefore, it's low-rise, downplayed materials, but inspired by the local materials of Delhi's surrounding region. So it's not a local context, but a slightly more regional context of Rajasthan, Haryana, UP, Himachal, etc., bordering Delhi. And therefore, we used brick, we used slate, including brick paving, which seems to have lasted nearly, well, more than 2 decades now, despite the extremely heavy usage that the project has. What we need in a city is really, for sustainability, is social infrastructure. And this is what a project like the Garden of Five Senses does. It creates a place for everybody to go and use, not the rich. And that's what we mean by creating democratic spaces. Again, successful, a bit of a lover's garden now, but even young couples need places. It's a direction it's taken on its own. And here is the sort of project when it was being built by, again, local craftspeople of the region. We tend to work a lot with craftsperson so that some of these skills stay alive. And, okay, I'll just close with this. This garden also has a lot of sculptures. It's one of the largest public places in the country with so many sculptures. Nearly 25 different sculptors worked in the project, from very well-known like Radha Krishna to young students then in the College of Art. I'll close with this. Thank you very much. But this is what it means to us. Make in India is at the moment a very fashionable word, but I think we have to take it out of the realm of fashion and keep it more about what we need to do continuously, at least for the next couple of decades, to bring our cities of some level of livability. Thanks.
If only all the architects and urban planners could get together to design cities like this, with street sections like this, which are as inclusive as this, I think we'd be quite sorted as a country, as the cities of our country are. I think that's the beginning of what a smart city would actually look like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand what is a smart city. For me, if a city is walkable, I think it's a smart city.
It's a smart city. So, I've been explicitly asked to boil down Padma Shri G Shankar's introduction to 2 lines. His firm and his team has helped design over 150,000 residences over their entire project cycle. And they have actually contributed by designing and building 500,000 mass housing units again across India. So can I please pass the dais on to sir.
Thank you very much for the opportunity given. Thanks Millie, Priyanka and Ankit for making this day beautiful. Having said that, I have to share a bit of unpleasantness also with you because everywhere I am finding a disconnect. It's this disconnect actually which brought me on in my life's journey also. I came to Delhi. I did some very unsustainable buildings in Delhi. I actually came to Delhi to study master's level architecture. I was confused there. I left the course. Then I began working in Delhi. 1 or 2 buildings, which I should also name, Le Meridian, the Hotel Le Meridian, and the underground car park, Paliga underground car park, were actually designed and built by me a few decades back when I was working as a junior architect in one of the leading firms in Delhi. And I learned how architecture should not be practiced and went back to my hometown, Trivandrum, and started my career there. And then I had to wait because I wouldn't do unsustainable buildings. I wouldn't compromise on my ideals. I wouldn't compromise on the premises that I hold very dear to my heart. And as the German philosopher said, Nietzsche said, a huge gap, infinity, in infinite space, between 1 and 0. There's an infinity between 1 and 0. That I realized at the start of my career. I had to wait for almost a year to get a person who would believe in me, believe in this technology, and prop me on. Here, I'm going to talk to you about sustainability, standing in front of you in one of the most unsustainable buildings I've ever seen. The natural light is completely shut out. The natural light is completely shut out. The ventilation is completely shut out. All wooden panels, all carpeted, floorings, carpeted kind of upholstery that you have, most unsustainable. And I'm not surprised. I'm pained. But it is this disconnect which should really lead you on. I don't want to talk about this, but this actually becomes the premises of my work and my talk. Just for your information, you must have heard Gaurav introducing in terms of the magnitude of work that I've done. Of all these things, 150,000 residences that I've designed and built, 500,000 mass housing units that I've done across the world, only one building is rated, because I actually went for rating, not me, my client had to go in for rating for his commercial purposes, for some renting out or something like that. You want to get a better rate for that, and he went for this thing. And to my utter disappointment, I got to a gold rating. I thought my building built completely sustainably, talking about materials, technologies, looking at orientation, siting, and all the parameters, to me, which actually contribute to sustainability. My building is a commercial building, big building, 21-story building, was given only a gold rating. And I probed why this was given only a gold rating, because this beautiful building was built actually out of mud blocks, had completely filler slab all around, cavity walls, siding was beautiful. They could have 90% of the area not air conditioned, looking at getting the ventilation. But they said I didn't have enough marks for green glazing and green air conditioning. So I left the grading at that, and I have carried my journey forward. To me, architecture, as I see it, the disconnect is actually about the sensibilities and sensitivity that that's missing in architecture, the way we see engineering products, the disconnect between the final product, house, building, as a living organism, that is missing. If you really feel that every building that we are going to build, I'm not talking about green for a moment, every building that we are going to build, whether it's a commercial building, whether it's an office building, whether it's a residence, the moment you realize that it has a soul, it has a life, then you won't hurt it. It is that is missing. And that is what our forefathers had been continuously telling us. When you're talking about design strategies and innovations that should be streamlined in the coming days, this is what I want to tell you. Buildings do have a soul. Buildings do have a life. If you treat them like living organisms, that's what our forefathers of architecture also taught us. We are talking about organic architecture promoted by Frank Lloyd Wright. He was also talking about that. When you treat land sensitively, when you treat building sensitively, you start treating the material sensitively, you start looking at a lot of things sensitively, and it is that sensibility and the sensitivity which unfortunately is missing in this thing. Look at some of the visuals that I'm going to show you. It's a huge journey for everybody. If you take it as a journey, you're naturally talking about ventilation, you're naturally talking about light coming in, you're naturally talking about the connectivities, you're already talking about the linkages and the rest of it that makes architecture. So if you can take it as a journey, probably it's going to be a lonely journey, it's going to be a tough journey, it's going to be a journey where hostilities will be there, but if you take it as a beautiful journey, your architecture is bound to become more meaningful. Let me reiterate that, more meaningful, and more suited to India. Let me reiterate, it is more, let us not look at global standards, let us not look at a university. India has had the best heritage, if you count, and I want to actually differentiate between tradition and heritage. The best vernacular residential architecture styles in the world. Let me tell you that. I'm working across the world. I'm working in Africa. I'm working in Latin America. I'm working in other parts of Asia. Let me say it with pride, with touching my heart, that India has had the most beautiful styles of architecture, most vernacular, most profound styles of architecture, which actually looked at all these things together. What Indian architecture actually looked at was eco-sensitiveness. We looked at the site, we looked at the building envelope, we looked at the shelter forms, we looked at the open spaces, we looked at the fenestrations, we looked at the user requirements. And what else is green architecture? It's all about that. Architecture, to me, if it's based on truthfulness and honesty, that is green architecture. If it's based on values, Indian architecture always were, I mean, whatever buildings that you see around were always based on truthfulness and honesty. Indian materials were very honest. I mean, we used to, see, when I talk about honesty, it's about taking honest materials, honesty in choosing the technology, honesty in leaving the site as it is. The houses that belong to the site, the houses that hug the profile of the land. If you could take it to that level, this is it. This is what I want at least students of architecture to imbibe. The ecstasy of observation, and the intimacy of relationship. Just take these words. I'm not being romantic, not for a moment. But then let me tell you, the ecstasy, if you can imbibe that spirit, the ecstasy of observation and the intimacy of relations, I mean, house, not as a machine to live in, but as a living organism, this thing is made. When I'm talking about our history, our lineage, let me talk about these three elements that actually made Indian architecture. Agasham, Kala, and Shakti, space, time, and energy. When I'm talking about, it's about Vastu, it's about Vastu. It's about Vastu that holds the building. It's about the metaphysical dimensions of the building. It's also about the context. See, this is what is sadly missing in Indian buildings. You see the pictures that are being shown. It doesn't have a context. It doesn't relate to Indian climate. It doesn't have an Indian context. This is very important. When you're talking about beautiful expressions of architecture, meaningful expressions of architecture, you should have the time element ingrained into that. So context is very critical in this thing. Let me use the other words. When you talk about Sugadarsham, don't you think it's a very beautiful way of putting it across? Sugadarsham is good for our eyes. Music is good for our ears. Sugadarsham is a good, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, we have a lot of determinants in architecture which talked about contrast, talks about harmony, rhythm, unity, and the rest of it. But when you're looking at a building, if it's a green building, you will get that good feeling. It actually evokes a sense of well-being, it evokes a sense of happiness, and it's all green. If you can look at the functional utility well, if you can create aesthetic without having to strive for that. If you have a good mind, naturally your face will reflect that. If you have good mind, healthy mind, your face will reflect that. So, I mean, I as an architect work on the elevations. I work on the functional utilities and the rest of it. And, you always get a beautiful, nice elevation. Responsive architecture is all about looking at resources. For instance, I'm a person who is continuously building in mud, earth as a building material. I've done the largest earth building in the world, talking about 600,000 square feet, one building, 600,000 square feet of built-up area in pure mud. No processing, nothing at all, pure mud. Why I talk about mud as a sensitive green building materials? Because I myself is a mason. I know the plasticity of the material, I know the durability of the material, I know the life of the material. I know the versatility of the material. I know the plasticity of the material because I work with my hands. And mud has got enough strength and enough durability like any other this thing. If you're talking about green technology, let's not for a minute talk about green glazing and green air conditioning. Let's talk about local resources. I mean, it was our father of the nation who actually asked us to do that. You have to take the resources from a 5-kilometer radius from where the site where you are planning to build a house. It talks a lot about the kind of the bad equations of globalization that's being promoted all over Japan, this thing. We have to look at local availability of material. We have to look at local skills. We have to look at energy efficiency, eco-friendliness, and the things like that. I'm actually concentrating on these three materials because it has got a lot of meaning, a lot of this thing to promote. For instance, let me just go back to this thing, lime. Lime, there are few engineers around. Lime is as long-lasting, as durable as cement, except in few engineering applications like concreting the roof and things like that. And bamboo, better tensile strength than steel. I mean, you can blast me off, but I'm just, the climate responsiveness, the open-ended forms, the symbols and meanings of architecture, the materials and construction techniques, and the rest of it. My actually stopwatch shows that I've got 1 minute left, but I was given to understand that 25 minutes was the time that I allotted. I never knew about the limitations, I never knew about the limitations. So you can't blame me if I'm going little this thing. Again, let me tell you this. I mean, by traditions, it's all about conservation of materials, reusing material, and recycling of materials. One of the things that nobody else is talking about is, let me reiterate on that. We are talking about green buildings. And somebody, I think it was Deepa, who actually mentioned about not building at all, because each building is actually creating a kind of burden on the Mother Earth. But not building probably may not work, but by maintaining a lot of maintainable buildings. Let me tell you, a lot of buildings are being ruthlessly demolished, a lot of buildings are being mutilated, manipulated, razed down to the site, ruthlessly killed, murdered, slaughtered, in the name of strength and in the name of durability. I think a lot of buildings, especially in the disaster situation, disasters, the opportunity, the contractors, the engineers will come in, ask you, retrofitting has never, unfortunately, come into our vocabulary. Retrofitting, reusing, recycling, maintenance of buildings, all these things can go a very long way in what we call as maintaining a green tradition and a green this thing, like that. The challenge before us, I've been talking about green buildings. This is a new green city that I'm going to develop somewhere in Naya Raipur, for which I got the best eco-city design. I'm coming back to Delhi to receive it in a few weeks. We are talking about all these things. We are talking about green corridors, green lungs, and the rest of it. The challenge that the architects and the planners in this country are actually facing is the space which is not being recognized, transitional areas. Between the urban and between the cup and the lip, with the urban areas and the rural areas, there's a new phenomenon happening. You have to see that, what we call as transitional rurality. And huge green questions are going to be asked. There's a huge domain called transitional rurality. So if you can't address the questions of transitional rurality, life is not going to be there for us. Let me just conclude this session. I've overgrown. These are few pictures of my own office building. It's a 6-storied mud building. During the day, there are no lights on. During the day, there are no fans on. 6-storied building, completely naturally ventilated. I'm not talking about fenestrations. I'm not talking about curtailing natural light. I don't talk about glare analysis. I don't talk about CFD analysis. I'm just interested in making life more comfortable, more meaningful. and I want to take off from there. Thank you very much for the kind listening.
I'd like to take responsibility for mismanaging the previous session, but sir was scheduled to speak for about 20 minutes, more than 20 minutes, and I'm so grateful to you to have stepped up and cut down the talk a little. Can I next invite Mr. Murli from Saint-Gobain. Saint-Gobain is, again, one of the front runners in the glazing technology all over the world. They're an organization that has also invented magic glass. It's not come to India yet, but it is in its research and development stage. Over to you, Murli.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Always there is a belief with every customer, say, if I have to go for a green, what else I have to compromise in my building? Or again, in the other way around, if I compromise, I can go for a green. But nevertheless, I think we, more or less, all the manufacturers now made solutions possible for everything. Go with green without there is an incremental cost too. I mean, it's an added benefit to the end customer. So more smart solutions, both with allocating both green and comfort without compromising anywhere. So we're trying to connect ourselves with what we can do for the upcoming smart cities, smart homes, smart residential segments. I just take you through a few of the solutions which we have now. So we just wanted to connect all the products that we have, which has always a human touch to it. So we have the human sensors, we have taken it. So we think the first thing that we want to take in priority, any building that we wanted to get in, is do the building is safe. Safe for the occupant, safe for the environment, or safe for in the way of the construction. Is it safe? But always there is an answer from us, it's yes. In what way that gets us is the first important safety criteria is how the building is safe for the occupant. Is it fire safety? Is it impact safety? Is it because the moment glass comes in to the picture, people think glass is not a safer material to be live with. But yes, it's a way that you have to handle glass. You can make the material more safer than any other material. We might be having a surprise that glass, the construction as a material, the compression strength of glass is ideally 1000 newtons per mm square. How many of us knows that? We speak about M50 concrete and M100 is what it to come. But how do we use that 1000 is the question. So we are there to help you in that. Again, in fire safety, we have a belief that always glass cannot withstand fire. It's proved. We have tested both internationally in Indian conditions that glass can withstand more than 2 hour fire rated. The advantage of glass, yes, it's visible. You might know when there is a fire is going to happen, when the smoke starts. We are having an alarm system that gives an indication that there is something going to happen. You have a glass where you are able to see the moment is going to happen. You are able to move it. Imagine that it's a dark wall. You will not know what is happening on the other side. So always we used to design buildings, try to avoid the exit ways, exit staircases, away from the visibility, and we say during fire you run here, take left, take left, take left. I don't think so it is practically possible someone during a hue of fire to find where he has to exit from that building. Why we do that? Because we don't want to aesthetically compromise. We think the traditional fire-rated doors or with wooden, with a steel encasing, with a small vision pans, which aesthetically not appealing. And we feel it's a very discomfort to use it in an office space, ideally. But now we have a solution. You can see the pictures there, which is tested, which is installed in India at IBM office, which is the 2 hour fire rated for complete installation. Here the challenge is complete installation mean it's like 2 hour fire rated for the server rooms without any smoke, heat ingress, thermal insulation. We take responsibility that we'll challenge that in 2 hours you can completely redo your entire server system out of the fire incident without any damage to the system. That's a product available in India. Usually we think that it's all solution from any of us is possible and we don't have the product in India, but it's produced in India, it's designed in India, made in India, make in India. Come back to this, the next sense of visualization, how comfort we are inside a building. Again, as Shankar sir was touching it, how to play with the daylighting, how to play with the glare, how to play with the color rendering, because color rendering again is a huge impact on the occupancy productivity. We have solution towards that. You have a product, earlier we used to have products, as a company we are celebrating our 350 years this year. You can imagine a company surviving with 350 years with producing the same product, but we have not reinvented glass, which invented 350 years before when we started it. But what we are reinventing is what kind of product that can go to the building. So we started with a clear glass, which has a higher light transmission, higher heat transmission rate, higher thermal discomfort. But we now have a product which you can design it. You can design the product's performance. We are at the verge of saying it's possible to have a customization for the building. How it is possible is, we proved there are n number of analysis, morning panelists we have discussed. There are a lot of provisions to understand what kind of building and what kind of light transmission you need, what kind of openings that you have to have, where you need to have the opening. It's all possible to understand. Out of that, then you come out with color rendering. Now you identified there is a glass with a particular solar factor, a particular heat transmission rate, and it's been installed in a building. But do I have a provision to change it? Do I have the provision to play with my VLT and solar factor? Yes, you have the provision to play even after the installation is done, with the support of a remote. It's like an air conditioning, you change your temperature, it's possible for you to change it. I think it's not working.
It's not okay. No, we had to cut time short.
I'll make it. So it's going back to the thermal insulation, you have to, we discussed about this, more about a climate-driven design has to be taken care. More respect to the glass, you have a products where high selectivity plays a key role, means more light transmission is possible without have any heat into the building with a lower U values as much as possible. So I'm just moving out because of this consistent alarming system available. So this I want to have a small discussion. This is what I said. We have a glass called Electrombot was explaining that. It is actually the launch of possibility to make it in India, where you will have a control system on your hands. This product can be connected to your building management system, or you can have a manual system where you can drop the light transmission, say from 60 to 6%, or even solar factor, say from 0.4 to 0.2, 0.2, 0.18. Means that it can be connected to the BMS, it automatically functions. During morning hour, it drops its VLT, make you comfortable inside the building, less glare, less daylighting into the building. The moment sun moves away from the facade, it automatically kickstarts its increasing the VLT from say 6% to even ideally 60% when you have a cloudy day. So now then in an office space like us, since I can enjoy this office, we have a lot of issues with the cabin to cabin, noise transmission, impact resistance. So we build a thicker partition wall between the cubes and spaces where we are not able to allow the light to transmit. Now we have a solution. You can have a properly designed laminated glass solutions where you can feel your transmission, light transmission, but without there is no disturbance of your acoustics issue. It takes care of a human impact strength. Coming back to the environmental concern and the smell, we have a products where all our products, Saint-Gobain has a global initiative saying it should be an eco-friendly product, anything you do it. So for example, in our interior range of product, it's easy to get, you might be knowing it, any color is possible with add-on lead as a pigment into the coloring agent. We have standard instruction from the management that we cannot use lead. So it's a complex design to bring a color which an architect wanted to match your interior of every building. Whoa. So, but it's possible. There is a basic R&D is what required. Now we love to say that we can do that in Indian constraint, and brings back to me how it is possible is the crux. Saint-Gobain has its R&D facility in India now, which works specifically to the hot and humid climate, which develops products towards the hot and humid environment. So this brings us a possibility of making a product which can sustain to this environment. So ideally we will close this with saying designed by India, which is possible to be made in India, made in India. Thanks for the opportunity.
So this is my giving up hope project. I want more of Pradeep Sachdevas and Mr. G Shankar is coming out of the country. And this presentation is moving on its own. So the project is called Swaraj. The project is targeting an audience of the country that I think is more important, school children. Because I think there's lesser hope with us. We're always looking at what's in it for me as far as green is concerned. So I want to create a pool of experts that just automatically gives rise to more of these people on the stage over here. This is a disclaimer for the project. Nothing in this presentation is true. It's merely a point of view, and there's always many points of view. So to accept it is your choice. The project is inspired by Mahatma Gandhi. It says that India should ever, if ever should India take to industrialism after the manner of the West, keeping the world in chains, if our nation took to similar economic exploitation, it would strip the world bare like locusts. I think we're getting there. Here's an excerpt from a presentation that was also shared yesterday at the curtain raiser. The built-up area in Indian cities will expand phenomenally in the coming decades. The new construction will be several folds more than the size of the current built-up area. The policies, regulations, etc. governing the building sector should also be addressed urgently to ensure their effective delivery. Therefore, this is the right time for course correction. Please notice the vocabulary. I don't know if we're aware of what the word will means. Will means I will that it shall be so. My will permits that India's cities by 2050 will have twice the population that it has today. How does an Indian person stand up and share this with Indian people is something that I don't understand. You should be saying, no, you can project this, but I'm not going to let it happen. I find lesser and lesser people saying that. More and more people saying it's going to happen, let's have green buildings. Maybe the solution doesn't lie there. Maybe. Remember I told you this is not the truth, this is only a point of view. This presentation is an attempt to impact your will. What if you were told that sustainability was not possible via all that you had learned so far? No green glass, no green buildings, no green urban design. What if the answer lay elsewhere? And what if the answer lay within? What if you were not designed to get the answer? Let's look at the background context of our life. The number that rules all life is a number called 1361, the solar constant. The Earth is designed to respond to the solar constant. How? There are 34 broad climate zones of the world, and if you look at India as a country, it has 11 of those 34 broad climate zones. We reduced them further in the National Building Code to 5. But if you look at soil types, India has 55 soil types across India, which again is a generalization. Where India finishes is where developed countries start. I mean in terms of latitude, which was driving spirit behind GRIHA as well. We finish at 36 or 38 degrees north latitude at Kargil, and that's where all developed countries start. So in terms of the amount of solar radiation reaching the Earth per square meter in India, it's very different as compared to what the developed countries, so to speak, experience. That's what the equatorial climate looks like, and that's what the equatorial people look like. That's what the mid latitudes look like. That's what the people look like. That's what the north latitudes look like. That's what the people look like. What's the highest selling cream in India? Fair and Lovely. That's the skin tone map of India. I don't know why this computer is skipping by itself. The skin tone map of India shows us that as you are closer to the equator, like a tandoori chicken, the part that's the fattest and closest to the fire, which is the equator, gets cooked the most. As you go away from the equator, skin tones change. The amount of solar radiation per square meter changes. Incidentally, where the maximum cooking happens also coincides with the biodiversity hotspots of the world. India happens to be one out of 17 mega-diverse countries in the world. Let's talk of language. Oh, thank you. Thank you. But I still have time. I'm managing this session till 1:30. We speak one language today. If you look at the consonant and vowel inventories of the world, the maximum vowel and consonant densities are closer to the equator. I used to make fun of my friends from Kerala. You speak funny. I don't understand you. Until one of my friends actually called me and said, repeat after me. And he rattled something off, and I couldn't repeat it. And he said, you don't have the kind of ability that I have to speak in language. And I realized that as you go further south and further south, the language gets more complicated. So does the architecture, so do the dance forms, so does the weaving patterns of the country, so does life. So as you move from the northern latitudes to the southern latitudes, people's height also changes. It goes from large to small. Now you won't believe me, but these are now scientifically established rules. So you have Bergman's rule, Allen's rule, Hess's rule, Gloger's rule. and this is India's food map. Does this respond to 5 climate zones as per the National Building Code? No. Does it involve 11 climate zones that the Köppen classification tells us? No. 55, more like it. Clothes across the world respond to the climate. That's the waste that the modern fashion industry generates in one day out of one factory in Hong Kong. Music across the world responds to the climate, local music. And this presentation is stuck. Architecture across the world traditionally responded to the local climate. Dance forms across the world traditionally responded to the local climate. And now we stand united. Same clothes. Same cars. Same language. Same food. Same architecture. Spot the tree. Same cities. We have product-based sustainability. You buy a CFL, you'll become sustainable. You buy a photovoltaic, you'll become sustainable. Buy glass, you'll become sustainable. Buy a green building, you'll become sustainable. Really? By shopping more, you can be sustainable? Where the world points to is developing countries. And if you look at what we are dealing with in India, this is what we are dealing with. We are trying to compare ourselves to the West. Have you seen our population densities? We have that much population in Mumbai on that much land. And we want to drive their cars, wear their clothes, adopt their lifestyle with a little bit of tweaking to cater to Indian conditions. That's the population density I'm dealing with in my country. I don't know about you guys. So what's missing? Swaraj. The 5 in Swaraj. Bhasha, Bhojan, Bhesh, Bhavan and Bhajan. We are working on a project in Bhutan where we told the people, don't go for air conditioning, go for the Bhutanese national dress and go for the national diet. And you'll have an efficient human being who's not outsourcing his comfort to the air conditioning system. They agreed. It's worked. What do we do? Workshop and curriculum interventions with schools across India to make them realize we need more of these kind of people who are sitting on the dais. With a commitment and a passion that's driven by the love for their country and their language and its clothes and its food and its music. Our vision, bringing sustainable development home. For God's sake, we've outsourced sustainable development. Our image of sustainability also is Western. Where all have we been? Schools across India, conducting workshops, working with curriculum interventions. We've been to Australia, we've been to South Korea, we've been under the UN Habitat mission. We have more acceptance overseas than we do in India. Your role, be Indian. Further, be local. It's okay to be local. Local is not a derogatory term anymore. Hey, local hai. If you have access to schools through your children and think this can benefit our common future, quote unquote, spread the word and get in touch with us. Thank you for who you are.